Hello, welcome everyone. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is the 99th week that we've had a meeting in a row. Thank you so much for all of your participation. Whether you're a veteran in this process or a new person, we welcome you. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator today, as well as Dennis Small and Dennis Speed. We have two Dennises here today. Try not to get too confused. Um, we created this forum 99 weeks ago in order to unite people from all over the world. I'm sure many of you are aware that the international peace movement has been very dysfunctional, a lot of infighting, fighting amongst various ideologies, and we wanted to say enough. If we're actually going to create a true peace process, we need to bring all people together into one room and actually have a dialogue of what is truthful and coordinate our activities. So I want to thank everyone again who has been participating in that process because it has been very successful. To start us off today, we'll have an opening panel of people just to give people a sense of what we're doing. And then we'll have a general discussion with the participants during the meeting. If you want to participate and ask questions, be part of the dialogue, you must be registered for the Zoom meeting. You can go to schillerinstitute.com, and right on the top of the website is where you can register to get the Zoom meeting. And we're happy to have you on today. So to kick off the discussion, which there's quite a bit to go through, and just so people know, normally we do have Helga Zepp-LaRouche on. She wasn't available today. We will have her again next week, so we look forward to that. But we'll have Dennis Speed of the Schiller Institute to start us off with an overview. Please go ahead, Dennis Speed.
I want to thank everybody, of course, for reaching out and being with us today. We want to point out that this is obviously a week of extraordinary events. The passing away of Pope Francis this past Easter Monday, in a moment of particularly great world turbulence, has caused something to happen that we want to address. As I think everybody is aware on this call, if you're not, the Schiller Institute, that is, will be hosting a conference. This will be May 24th and 25th. It's called A Beautiful Vision for Humanity in Times of Great Turbulence. And certainly we see that. But what has occurred is that as a result of the passing of the Pope, there are both important statements being made, but there's an even more important process that's underway. And I'm not talking about the process in the church with respect to the conclave that will happen in order to select a new Pope that will begin after the period of mourning, which I believe will end next Wednesday or Thursday, followed by the conclave, and that goes a couple of weeks. And it's relevant to cite that because it involves 1.4 billion Catholics and the countries that they occupy. Uh, but that's not really what we're referring to. We're referring to the fact that there's a whole set of deliberations that are now underway, which have been transformed not merely by that event, but by the context in which that event occurs. Vladimir Putin, speaking about this on the day of the Pope's death, actually April 21st, said this, and I think we can put that up on the screen. He said, "I am not sure about Catholics, but Orthodox people have such an understanding, such an internal tradition, a traditional understanding that if God calls a person to heaven during Easter time, it is a special sign that that person has not lived his life in vain, has done a lot of good for the people, and God calls him to heaven on these festive Easter days." I think this is the case. I mean that the Pope has done a lot of good, not only for his flock, but for the world at large as well. Now you want to consider this is Vladimir Putin speaking about the Pope, with whom he was having disputes. I think the last time he had actually seen him would have been in 2019, I believe. But that's his evaluation of both the life of and the significance of the transition and the process of shift. I think that's important for us to keep in mind because throughout the last roughly 2 weeks, there have been many very important statements, but they're statements that indicate a kind of junction of change, a conjuncture of transformation. For example, Nikolai Patrushev, the former head of Russia's FSB, very close to Vladimir Putin and actually a presidential advisor to Putin, talked about how Russia and the United States, he said, as great powers, um, have a shared experience. And he said, I believe that today a first step toward that a shared experience could be a joint statement on an historical experience which would serve as a symbolic basis for a reset of Russian and American dialogue. Now, he cited the Suez Crisis of 1956. He cited, of course, the Russian and American joint discussion deployment against Nazism, and of course the Lend-Lease process of FDR, and even referred to the period of Lincoln's collaboration with Tsar Alexander II at the time of America's so-called Civil War, 1861 to 65. We had also on April 21st a speech which was to have been given by the Iranian foreign minister in person at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, but he was prevented from doing that as a result of what looked like an impending intervention coming from Israel and other forces. But he had something as a message that he intended to deliver, and this was posted by Iran. So Foreign Minister Araghchi said, Iran has long been committed to principles of universal access to peaceful nuclear technology and rejection of atomic weapons. We are the only country on the planet that officially opposes nuclear arms on moral and religious grounds through a religious edict by Iran's supreme leader. Then he talked about how the Iranian program had been created through the Atoms for Peace program of Eisenhower, with its assistance, that was. And then he talked about the idea of the long-standing, as he called it, game plan that we have to build 19 more reactors. Now, that, by the way, is a plan that goes back to the Shah of Iran, who actually, during the period of the late 70s, was talking about the United States building 8 reactors. So for the fact that they bring this up and talk about the idea, as they say, the Iranian market alone is big enough to revitalize the struggling nuclear industry in the United States. Now, whatever you may think about nuclear power one way or the other, the relevant element is that this is being said by the foreign minister of Iran as a direct approach to the United States in terms of the idea of economic collaboration with this nation. And he could not give that, as I say, in person because of the possibilities of disruption, which were being talked about during the Q&A. What I want to point out concerning this matter of the Pope is that rather than focus on the figure of Francis alone, it's the papacy, it's the transition of the institution that's most important. The last time, of course, when Benedict XVI resigned, there was also a papal conclave at that point. But you're talking here about a process that you have to harken back to really John Paul II, I think, and what happened with him in 2005. But we don't have time to go into much of the history around this. But I do want to point to points at which the papacy intervened in a decisive way on the question of war. Certainly Pope Francis talked about this many times, but it was John the 23rd in his Pacem in Terris encyclical that may have made the most telling statement. This was during a period when you were in the middle of just in the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he pointed out in his encyclical called Peace on Earth, he said, men, both as individuals and as intermediate groups, are required to make their own specific contributions to the general welfare. The main consequence of this is that they must harmonize their own interests with the needs of others and offer their goods and services as called upon. And he talked about the idea of the authority of the state being that it had to exercise in a way that has to be morally irreproachable, but also best calculated to ensure or to promote the general welfare. These are ideas that are generally associated, or would seem to be, with the Constitution of the United States, but they were being talked about by a pope at that point. In talking with Helga Zepp-LaRouche just before this began, was asking her about her thoughts about today, knowing she was not able to be on, and she referenced the Sermon on the Mount, uh, which as the basis for what she believed had to be thought about as the policy outlook for peace in the world. The statement of that I think is most succinct, rather than us talk about the theology of it, was actually made by Martin Luther King. Uh, it was March 31st of 1968 at Washington National Cathedral. And he said the following. He said, "One day we will have to stand before the God of history, and we will talk in terms of things we've done. We will be able to say we built gargantuan bridges to span the skies. We built gigantic buildings, span the seas, excuse me. We built gigantic buildings to kiss the skies. We made our submarines penetrate oceanic depths. We brought into being many other things with our scientific and technological power. But it seems that I can hear the God of history saying, that was not enough. For I was hungry, and ye fed me not. I was naked, and ye clothed me not. I was devoid of a decent sanitary house to live in, and ye provided no shelter for me. And consequently, you cannot enter the kingdom of greatness. If ye do this, do it unto the least of these, my brethren, ye do it unto me." In this time in which many talk about making their nations great, this statement from King needs to be, I think, recalled. And that is the standpoint from which greatness in the world today has got to be pursued. Our conference is intended, I think, to do that. And I want to just call attention to that. And we'll say more about that later. So that's what I'd like to open with.
Thank you very much, Dennis Speed, for that. And we'll continue with the opening part of this discussion. We'll now go to Dennis Small. And just to let people know, we do have possibly a surprise guest hopping on who has very limited time. So I just want to inform people to not be alarmed if I have to cut someone off to let them in. You will not be disappointed. So please go ahead, Dennis Small.
Yeah, the hook is a very well-recognized instrument of handling meetings of this sort. No problem whatsoever. I actually want to go back for a moment to the very origins of the IPC, which is 99 weeks old now, coming up on 2 years. As I recall, the first meetings were held in May 2023. Immediately before that, kind of as a predecessor concept that led to the formation of the IPC, was an open letter directed to His Holiness Pope Francis by a number of individuals, including Helga Zepp-LaRouche, former President Donald Ramotar of Guyana, then candidate for Senate of New York, Diane Sayre, and many other people who were instrumental, especially Helga Zepp-LaRouche, in forming the IPC. And what that letter called for, it was addressed to His Holiness saying, "We see the impending danger of nuclear war and global Armageddon. Your Holiness's call for a negotiated peaceful solution is urgently needed. Our group wishes to support this initiative in any way we can, including gathering together all who wish for peace and the prevention of nuclear war. We believe it is urgent to unify all such efforts into a globe-spanning movement to bring resolution to this conflict," speaking of Ukraine, "taking into consideration the valid security interests of all parties." So this very much sounds like, because it is, the initiating concept behind the IPC, the International Peace Coalition. So with that in mind, in terms of what the Pope's passing means, let me just talk about two of the week's developments that point in the direction of the solution concept, which we've consistently tried to have pushed forward for discussion, not simply a description of the problems, but to discuss the concepts needed for a solution. First, in terms of the developments around Ukraine this week, I think we all probably, our heads are spinning because of the constant changes back and forth. A meeting in London organized by the Europeans, supposedly where the United States would be present, the Ukrainians would be present. That didn't happen. It flopped completely. Throughout this whole thing, the Russians have been very, very clear that they need to maintain and foster the discussion with the United States for normalizing relations as being essential for world peace and for solving all the particular problems. And they're being very mature about this. They're not going for bait and those who are trying to provoke a conflict. The Kremlin spokesman Peskov, as late as yesterday, was saying, look, things are going forward fine. Of course, there are ups and downs and difficulties. There are the comments by Patrushev, which Dennis Speed referred to earlier. Shoigu, former defense secretary, now security head, said the Europeans are the ones that are trying to provoke war. It is not the United States. This is all very significant because I would suggest that it's not helpful either for an intelligence reading or for the health of your neck to try to follow the back and forth like a ping pong game of what's going on around Ukraine day to day. That's not where it's at. There's an underlying question here. And one of the underlying issues, a central one, is the big lie, the very, very big lie, that this is a, quote, unprovoked aggression by Russia, forgetting that history actually existed before 2022. There was a new statement about how the Russians have no intention whatsoever of moving on any countries in Europe from General Kuyat in Germany, a very important commentator. And perhaps most significant of all, besides the comments from Russia, again, that they have no such intentions, were the documented statements made by Ambassador Jack Matlock, the former ambassador of the United States to the Soviet Union, in a dialogue he had with Helga, I think about a week and a half ago now. And as Helga has repeatedly stated, Matlock was an eyewitness to the developments. And when he says promises were made to the Soviet Union, which we then did not fulfill, and that was the cause of the problem in going back to the NATO expansion, there is hardly a more authoritative voice available than that of Ambassador Matlock, who will participate in the upcoming May 24th, 25th conference of the Schiller Institute, along with other distinguished speakers to discuss this issue, among others. So this is quite significant. In light of what the actual underlying issue is, which is the drive for war against Russia, regardless of any excuses or provocations that can be concocted, the drive from the financial centers of the West through NATO to do that, I would like to advise people that we should keep our eyes open and our ears to the ground on a possible 9/11 style provocation, to the degree to which the British in particular continue to fail in their efforts to provoke a United States-Russia confrontation or breakup of the discussions now underway, to the degree to which the Europeans fail in the efforts to get a war going directly with Russia through Ukraine and from the Europeans, to that same degree, because of what is the driving force behind this, which is not the diplomacy. The diplomacy is a reflection of the driving force. Don't mistake the match for the bomb here. We should be well aware of the possibilities of a Reichstag fire or a 9/11 style provocation to try to blow things up completely. And in particular, I would draw all of your attention to what is going on now in the Kashmir area between India and Pakistan, that conflict area, which is perfectly capable by British calculation to lead to the explosion of a nuclear confrontation as well. There is a very telling article published by Chatham House just yesterday, Royal Institute of International Affairs, where they end by saying, without significant international pressure to de-escalate, wink, wink, the only real restraints on both parties are concerns of a possible nuclear escalation and the impact of a conflict on their economies. So Chatham House is talking openly about this being another option for a nuclear escalation. The second topic that I want to briefly take up under the same heading of don't mistake the match for the bomb in terms of what's really going on is what's happening around the tariff question. And if you didn't wreck your neck following Ukraine with a ping pong back and forth, if you tried to do that on the tariff question, you definitely need to go see the physical therapist, because this tariff question is a matter where you have to look behind the scenes. Now, I see that my homonym Dennis Kucinich is on, and I understand his time is limited. I'll interrupt my remarks right there and pick them up after he takes the floor. So,
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd like to welcome Mr. Kucinich, and thank you for joining us. He's a former congressman from Ohio and a two-time presidential candidate. And my God, would this have been a much better situation had you won the presidency. And I want to thank you again for joining us and all of the work that you've been doing, Mr. Kucinich, all of these years. Please take the floor.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation to join and to thank each one of you for your personal commitment for peace and social and economic justice. The journey that each one of you took to this moment is honored, and I'm grateful to participate, if only for a few minutes. I keep getting back to this point of it's like we need a new language to describe the horror that's going on, the justification, rationalizations that have been made, cry out for our response. And the political system has been bought, unfortunately, and the media. There's not many people who can go to the media who are inside the government to protest what's going on in Gaza in particular. And so we have this anesthetizing, a kind of numbness that has taken place. People are breaking through. I mean, groups of people around the country and certainly around the world are going to the streets. And I think ultimately, that's the kind of action that, nonviolent, that will help tip the balance. It was when students in particular went to the streets during the Vietnam War that Lyndon Johnson decided that he couldn't defend it anymore and he stepped down. Of course, Nixon and Kissinger kept it going for quite a few more years. But the ferment that was out there in the country helped to force a reconsideration of America's role. But here we are again. The mass violence. You had Vietnam, Iraq, Gaza, and it's an arc of inhumanity. And so in our country, the United States, I know there's people on this call from, outside the states, but the United States is a principal initiator of this. So we have a lot of work to do inside our own country. And it's not just at the policy level. Even before we get to the policy level, we have to think about the consciousness from which derives these murderous policies. And that's a shift that takes place through the instrumentality of our own beings and speaking out and gathering people. And that's why, thanks for what IPC is doing and for all those of you who do this work. So, and, in any way that I can be of assistance to what you're trying to do, count me in.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kucinich, for that. I know Ray McGovern, really, he's so excited to have you on and really wanted you on today. I know that he wanted to make sure, and your time is limited.
Well, Ray's one of my heroes, so it's great to be with.
Well, wonderful. Well, he wanted to make sure if you were available, if you could stay a little bit so you could hear what he had to say, and then you guys can have a response.
You know what? I'd love to hear what Ray has to say, and then I would say I can push things back here. Just let me do a quick text. I'm good for at least till 11:40 Eastern. So
Thank you.
So yes, Ray, go ahead.
We appreciate it. Go ahead, Ray McGovern.
May I be heard? Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
Well, what a gift to have all these Dennises on there, all three of them, especially my friend Dennis Kucinich, who is probably the direct successor of my real hero, and that was John F. Kennedy, a man of peace, but a man of courage and a man of justice. Okay, and that's what I want to talk about now. We come out of the same faith tradition, and that means a lot to me as well. And I noticed that Father Berry is going to be on, and Jack Gilroy. My God, we got a bunch of macro snappers on here, a bunch of Roman Catholics coming out of a wider ecumenical tradition, and I stress that. So Francis is dead. What did Francis do about Gaza? Francis did pious statements about Gaza. His most specific, and I put that in quotes, his most specific statement was, I'm told by my advisors that a lot of people think that there might be a genocide going on there in Gaza, and so I think we should have an investigation. This is months after the World Court had already indicted Netanyahu and Gallant. It reminds me of World War II and Pius XII, who couldn't find his voice. There are structural indignities, no matter what Francis may have wanted to do. He didn't do it, okay? That's my reality. He's a nice guy. He's a mensch, okay? Well, when my webmaster put my little article up about this, he said, nice guys don't win ball games and nice guys don't stop genocide. What's the bottom line here? What's the bottom line here? Well, it's good news and it's bad news. It's up to us. And that's just good news because we're up to it, okay? Let's go back a ways. Yahweh to Cain after he had murdered his brother. So, Cain, where's your brother? How am I supposed to know? It's none of my damn business. Or, more faithful to the text, am I my brother's keeper? Well, I think people on this call are brothers and sisters keeper, and those people are in Gaza are very much in need of our help right now. So we have that witness there from the Bible story. We also have my favorite rabbi, Rabbi Abraham Heschel, who famously said, and I want to read this, when injustice takes place, few are guilty, but all are responsible. Indifference to evil, look at Cain, for example. Who cares about me? Who cares about my brother? Indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. Abraham Heschel, very active during the Vietnam days and so forth. Who else? Well, how bad is it in Gaza? There was a Archbishop Tutu who actually ministered to Nelson Mandela and knew apartheid in South Africa back and forth, right? What did Tutu say when he was asked, could you compare apartheid in South Africa and apartheid in Palestine? And he said, yeah. He said, of course I can compare that. Here's what it is. Life in Palestine is far more brutal and repressive than in apartheid South Africa. And my friends, that was before the genocide, okay? Now, I often quote a fellow named Albert Camus, and you know the story if you've been listening to these things about how he talked to the Dominicans about the absence of a voice from Rome during World War II. He said, me, an agnostic? A voice from Rome? Yeah. And he said, then I was told there was an encyclical. And then I said, what's an encyclical? So then he said, what has to happen is the voice has to come through loud and clear so the simplest man or woman can understand it. And that's not enough. But he also said to a friend, actually, this is during the height of the war, 1943. it is the job of thinking people not to be on the side of the executioners. Get this. He got the Nobel Prize in 57. He expressed the hope that the quality of the new generation and its increased unwillingness to adopt slogans or ideologies and return to a more tangible value system. We have nothing to lose, says Camus, except everything. So let's go ahead. This is the wager of our generation, and we could be led by people like Dennis Kucinich. If we had to fail, it is better in any case to have stood on the side of those who refuse to be dogs and are resolved to pay the price that must be paid so that men and women can be more than dogs. Lastly, from Camus, 1943, a letter exchange with a young German who was very proud. He was going to make Germany great again. Okay, comparisons are invidious, but this is his words, okay? Camus, in answer to him, you told me that the greatness of my country, Germany, is beyond price, this young fellow. Anything is good that contributes to its greatness. Those who, like us young Germans, are lucky enough to find a meaning in the destiny of our nation must sacrifice everything else. 1943, already we knew the genocide was going on. No, says Camus, I told you, I cannot believe that everything must be subordinate to a single end. There are means that cannot be excused. And I should like to be able to say I love my country and still love justice. I don't want for my country a greatness born of blood and falsehood. I want to keep it alive and keep justice alive. I want to finish here quickly by just referring to things that happened more recently, okay? Let me talk about Heschel again. He was at Selma. As I say, he marched in all kinds of justice processions and demonstrations. This is what he said, quote, for many of us, the march from Selma to Montgomery was about protest and prayer. Legs are not lips, and walking is not kneeling, and yet our legs uttered songs. Even without words, our march was worship. I felt my legs were praying, or my legs were demonstrating, okay? Now, how about a more recent? One of my favorite theologians is Annie Dillard. Here's what she said. It's really up to us. There never has been any other. Not popes, not moral leaders that could exert leadership. Here she continues. There are enough of us. But what we need to do is amass half-dressed in long lines like tribesmen and shake our gourds at each other to wake up instead of we watch television and miss the show. Okay, I'll go back to a biblical story and I'll talk about Isaiah, something most people don't know. Did you know that he walked around for 2 years stark naked? Well, it's in the Bible, folks. Look it up. What was he trying to say? He was trying to garner attention to himself. And people said, oh, that's awful, you're stark naked. And what he said was, I stripped myself of clothes. You are stripped of the gift given you by Yahweh, the vision of justice and shalom. Justice and shalom, okay? Shalom is nothing more in the biblical sense than the existence, the presence of justice, okay? So we can have peace, but we have to have justice first. Now, the last thing I'll say is that we have to keep our heads on straight and look at the benefits of being in solidarity with one another. Look, I used to, when I speak, I said, look around you, for God's sake. How can you not be encouraged with such fine companions in this struggle? And one of the consolations for me was I have Stone. Now he warns us. He says, look, the only kinds of fights worth fighting are those that you're going to lose, because somebody has to fight them, and somebody has to lose and lose and lose until someday somebody who believes as you do wins. Well, in the process, we have to keep our senses of humor and have some fun, okay? A friend of mine was a priest, and he had a brother, a priest, and they both came back to their Irish mother, and they talked about all the dogma that they talked about. And she said, tell me now, was there any fun at this meeting of yours? And they were stunned, because they realized that without some fun, nothing is going to happen. So let's be justice people. Let's have some fun, but let's stick to it, as Dennis Kucinich and many of you have already done. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ray. And Mr. Kucinich, if you want to say anything, I know you have to get going, but thank you
Yeah,
for staying on.
well, I want to thank Ray as well for that erudite presentation. It is on us. What I'm doing right now is I'm writing, and I post on Substack. If you get a chance to go to Dennis Kucinich at Substack, you can get a free subscription. And I'm writing exactly about these topics that we're concerned with. And I can be emailed personally. This is just for this group at contactkucinich@gmail.com. It's one label, contactkucinich@gmail.com. Thank you for the work that all of you do. Thanks again, Ray, and I'll look forward to seeing you, joining you again. Keep going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
again,
you.
Mr. Kucinich.
Bye now.
Bye. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go back to our other Dennis to see if he wanted to jump back in and finish what he wanted to say. Otherwise, we can continue with the agenda. That was wonderful.
You got to
Mr.
specify which
Kucinich,
Dennis you're referring to, since there's a couple more left. But-
Dennis Small.
Let me just indicate, I believe Ray may have to get going. So
If I could say a word.
Go ahead, Mr.
yeah.
Mr. McGovern.
Wish me luck, and those of you who are praying types, please hold me in the light. This afternoon, I'm going to Moscow together with Oliver Stone. We have several meetings and panels set up, and best of all, we'll be there at the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, where we were allies. And we want to stress that we were allies then. John Kennedy, in that wonderful speech, his peace speech, said that almost alone among major powers in the world, the US and Russia have never been at war. We're going to try to speak and spread the word around. Maybe some of it will come back to the US as well. But the idea is this is something to celebrate. There is the possibility that this fellow Steve Witkoff, who's in Moscow as we speak, just finished talking to Putin, will have some good news for us. I think that's where the game is being played. So wish me luck, and I probably will not be able to join you next week, but I'll be with you in spirit.
Well,
Thank
safe
you.
travel.
I do have one piece of advice, Ray, for your trip. Have
Yes.
fun.
Was that?
Have fun.
Have fun. Oh, perfect. Okay, on that note, thanks very much, folks.
okay, thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay, back to you, Dennis.
All right. Well, you know what they say. That's a hard act, or those are hard acts to follow. But I think that I do plan to have a little bit of fun in just the concluding point that I wanted to make, which is this whole discussion around the tariffs. I mean, this policy has been completely insane. one of the more revealing comments about the tariffs, revealing about the commentators, not about the policy, was an open letter issued on the 18th of April by 1,632 signers, headed by two Nobel Economics Prize winners, Vernon Smith, Harvard, 2002, and James Heckman, Chicago, 2000, and also that notorious Phil Gramm, heading the list of a whole bunch of people who signed. And they correctly criticized the tariffs for this, that, and the other. They're unconstitutional. It's going to lead to insanity, collapse, and so on. All of that is true. The problem with their entire statement is that it blames the entire international crisis on the tariffs. And that's absolutely not true. That is mistaking the match for the bomb. What's bad about the tariffs is that it will that more quickly ignite what is an underlying economic problem, which Lyndon LaRouche pointed to repeatedly, which is an overhang of over $2 quadrillion in speculative financial instruments that cannot possibly be paid, coupled with a collapsing physical economy that has no basis for keeping any of that bubble afloat. And you walk into a room filled with that kind of dynamite, and you light that match of tariff warfare, and the consequences will be quite explosive and quite predictable. Now, let me just make a point here on this. Phil Gramm, I mean, let's leave the Nobel Prize guys out for the moment. Phil Gramm is one of the authors of the famous 1999 Financial Services Modernization Act, otherwise known as Gramm-Leach-Bliley. What did that act do? It eliminated the Glass-Steagall law adopted by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933, which in effect kept the speculative bubble at bay until 1999. It started earlier, admittedly, 1971, but when the Glass-Steagall law was repealed, thank you to Gramm, to Leach and Bliley, and approved by Clinton. And in that regard, I think I have to say parenthetically that the reason Clinton, who had been opposed to this kind of opening the doors to the speculative bubble, the reason that he capitulated and signed the whole thing had far less to do with Gramm, Leach, and Bliley, and a whole lot more to do with a person with the surname Lewinsky, because he was Lewinsky'd during that period, and therefore he did manage to avoid actual, well, he was impeached, but he was avoided being removed from the presidency. But any possible opposition to this absolutely critical change in paradigm of removing the Glass-Steagall legislation occurred as a result of that. And I have therefore proposed, and I hope it does go down in the history books this way, that the law should actually be known as Gramm, Leach, Bliley, Lewinsky. Because those are the actual authors of that legislation. So why would it be surprising that Phil Gramm be one of the critical co-authors of a statement which correctly talks about the tariff problem, but absolutely ignores the gigantic elephant in the room, the major problem, because he was responsible for that in large measure by the elimination of the Glass-Steagall legislation, which opened the doors to this phenomenal expansion of the speculative bubble. So as people watch the tariff ping pong game and the statements back and forth from Trump and from Bessent and from others about what the policy of the day is going to be, 125, 225, no, down to 50%. None of that is particular to the point. It's important to follow, but the crucial question is, will the underlying economic crisis be solved or not? And in that regard, I think the Chinese have been very clear. The spokesman for the Foreign Ministry of China stated straightforwardly, if you want to negotiate, we can negotiate, but we will not negotiate under conditions where we are being threatened with massive economic attacks against us. We will simply not, and we cannot do that. Same kinds of comments came from the Commerce Secretary of China and so on. And that's the fact of the matter. The underlying point here, and this does tie back to the whole issue of the papacy and the issue of Paul VI's comment that development is the new name of peace, is that the only policy that will actually work on a sustainable basis to prevent the danger of nuclear war, whether it be in Ukraine or in Iran or now India, Pakistan, is a total change in the architecture of security and development internationally. We have to have a policy of peace through development, not peace, and also we'll see if we can have development. The only actual lasting basis for peace is a policy of global development in which the starving and destroyed and just the atrocities committed against the children of Gaza, as an example of what's happening internationally, are resolved by policies such as the Oasis Plan, which Mr. LaRouche has proposed all along, as an example of the kinds of policies that are required globally. So I think that the IPC's focus from the very beginning, even before it was brought into existence, on peace through development and appealing to the Pope on that basis remains the central concept, and that policy discussion will be the centerpiece of what will be on the table at the May 24th, 25th Schiller Institute International Conference.
Thank you very much, Dennis Small, for completing our full roundedness of the Dennises today. This has been a really fun opening portion of the discussion. So I'd like to continue in this thread that we've had, in particular going from the passing of the Pope. We have on Father Harry Burry, who is he's, I want to say, if you're a member of the U.S. Priests Association or had been a member, I know that you've been a significant activist in the past. I remember that I've seen pictures and heard reports of you chaining yourself during the Vietnam War in order to make a very important statement. And all of the work that you've done for so many years, Father Burry, we definitely appreciate that. And thank you for joining us today. There you are. I see you. You have the floor. Please go ahead, Father.
Really important for me, I think for all of us listening to this program.
Unfortunately, I can't hear you. Is that just on my end? No.
It's
No.
very faint. You can only.
Trying this loudly, is it all right? Can you hear me?
Barely.
That's a little better, but
Okay, I'll try again.
that's getting better.
Okay. What is really significant to me is that Helga has been arguing about the importance of seeing people as all good. And the Holy Father, Pope Francis, treated people as all good. And one of the reasons for the conflict in the world, it seems to me, is because we misunderstand what justice is about. We think that justice is vengeance. So when we think that the way to end evil doing, to prevent people from doing bad things, is by punishment. And punishment is violence. And when you use violence, you lead to vengeance. And that's what we are experiencing. And Helga and Pope Francis have argued against that. And the Oasis Plan calls for equity. That means to treat everybody equally. And so the Schiller Institute and Pope Francis were speaking the same message. And I hope that people begin to understand that the reason that people all over the world have liked St. Pope Francis is because he thinks of the people on the margins. And that's what there wouldn't be any people on the margins if we had the Oasis Plan, in which we get peace through development. So it's important for me anyway to understand and continue to promote the Oasis plan because it's in the spirit of Pope Francis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry Barry. Let me just say something. Yeah, I think he has to mute. Yeah, just so people know, because many people will be on who will not know. I'll just read something from his biography. Father Harry Burry's activism started as a new priest serving at the University of Minnesota's Newman Center in the 1960s, when young Catholic men asked him to write letters for them as conscientious objectors for the Vietnam War. And in 1971, at the request of some Vietnamese, he and 3 others chained themselves to the U.S. Embassy gate in Saigon to protest the Vietnam War. So that was not a protest here that Anastasia was referring to. That's a protest in Saigon, all right, in the 1970s. That's very much in the Rabbi Heschel mode. And then in 2005, when he was in Gaza serving as a human shield, and was temporarily abducted at that point. So this is a man who clearly has done exactly what Ray McGovern was talking about before. We're always honored to have him with us, and we are particularly honored about his clear idea about the Oasis plan that has been put forward and will be being discussed, by the way, at our conference. So, Father Barry, I just wanted to make sure you got recognized for that, and thank you again very much for your remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, Father Burry, and thank you, Dennis, for your correction on that. Okay, I'm going to go to you next, Jack Gilroy. I know you might be in the middle of a couple of things. I just want to make sure that you're available. I'm sending you the promotion to a panelist if you're able to accept that. If not, I can just let you speak without your video. Okay, looks like you're able to unmute now. Please go ahead. Jack Gilroy is a member of Veterans for Peace, Pax Christi, New York, and Pax Christi International. Thank you so much for joining us, Jack. Or were we able to connect you in? Oh, I see you have permission to unmute. Okay. If you're still in the middle of something at the moment, we can always come back to you, Jack. Maybe we should go to the next person and come back. I think
Yes.
that's what we'll do. Okay, so please stay safe and we'll come back to you, Jack. So next I'd like to go to Carolina from Mexico. She has a report on the youth recruitment process. There's been, as reported over the last few weeks, we've been making a very huge effort going into the May conference to go to universities, go to various places where many young people are, and getting them active. And Mexico in particular has had quite a bit of traction. So we're happy to have Carolina Dominguez on to give her report on what's been going on. Please go ahead.
Hola, ¿se escucha?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Gracias. Quiero
Thank you.
darles un informe de
I want
las
to give you,
actividades que estamos teniendo, no
I
solo en
want to tell you
México,
about the
sino en
activities we
Iberoamérica.
have, not only in Mexico, but in
Quiero comenzar
Iberoamerica.
antes
I want to start
mencionando
first
algo que nos ha ayudado
mentioning
a
that
este
something
trabajo,
that has helped
principalmente
us
con
in the
ustedes han
work,
escuchado con los jóvenes.
as you guys have heard with the
Este
youth.
documento que quiero
This
mencionarles
document
es
that I
un
want to
libro
mention is a
de Martin
book
Luther King que se llama
from Martin Luther King called
un libro
Why We Can't
extraordinario
Wait.
que yo
It's a
recomiendo
very
mucho
extraordinary book
porque ahí
that
Martin
I
Luther King lo
recommend to
dedica
everybody because
principalmente a sus hijos,
Martin Luther King
pero la
dedicates
dedicatoria
that to his
habla
children, but
espera
in
que en el
his
futuro
forward. He says he hopes that in the future, his children would be judged not by the skin color, but the character and their actions. And in this book, he presents the famous letter that he wrote from the Birmingham jail, where he answers to critics from his collaborators, saying that when they were saying his actions were not correct, his actions were not correct, and he shouldn't be, and he was, because of those, he was in jail. And he says something very funny, and he answers, I don't respond to the critics, because if I am answering to that, I will not be able to do anything, because most important are the actions. And in that sense, he responds to something that for us has been fundamental in the work with the youth. And it's the concept of the nonviolent action. And his response is that why they have to do demonstrations and activities. He says the best way to have agreements is negotiation. And Martin Luther King answers that is true, but when the leadership doesn't want to negotiate because they don't consider it's important what the other people are presenting, we need to provoke that negotiation, provoking a tension. And that's what he's talking about when he's creating tension through action. And he says the individual has to be clear that he's not in agreement with what is going on. The individual morally, he has to be very clear that what is occurring is not what he believes in. And he has to be very clear on that, not only in his heart, but in society. And those nonviolent actions create a tension that allows that they can be heard. So that for us is very important, because of course, many people consider that a mobilization, a demonstration, or some action to be in disagreement with the ideas has to be violent. But the idea that this will open the way for a proposal. And what we are doing in the international youth movement, not only in Mexico and Iberoamerica, but internationally, with the leadership before of Lyndon LaRouche and now with Helga LaRouche, we are doing that precisely, generating that tension, but not only to bring youth to be scapegoats, as is being done in the wars or political parties that they are used during the elections. They are used and then they are discarded. In the Schiller Institute, we have a constant campaign of education in profound ideas that allow the youth to become leaders, because those ideas are on proposals, economic proposals. And in that process of working with the youth, we first have to understand that they need a level that allows them to be heard. Youth have a lot of potential, not only because of the age, but because they are taking decisions about their quality, moral quality long term. And we need to give them the tools so when they decide what is the moral quality, the path they will take will have sufficient elements to do what is right. And in that work with the youth, we are having meetings, dialogues, international dialogues, where youth are participating from Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Europe, United States. and they are presenting what they are their concerns about the situation today. They don't want a war, of course, but they don't have any options of what they can give to society. We just had a dialogue last week, an international dialogue, a youth dialogue, where they presented several proposals about energy, about jobs, what kind of jobs youth will have, what they can do in order to change the situation. And they were very honest and basic questions, important to, they should be answered. And I want to say that when we are generating this tension, a state of tension, and where some congressman or leader says, okay, I will listen to you. What do you have to tell them? We need to be ready to know what we are going to say, because there is a tension, a state of tension, and we have to have those proposals, and the youth have to know how to change the economy. And that's why we have these youth dialogues, and that's why we are working and we are talking to them what is economy, what is truth, and what it gives value to people. Because now the main product in economy are people. That's the product, are the people. And LaRouche said that the main thing that moves the economy is creativity, the ideas generated by individuals who want things better. So when we are talking to them and they are before a leader and they say, what do you have to tell me? They have to be very clear that what we are presenting, what will work for the economy. And that's what we are giving the youth. What is productivity? What is economy? It has been very polemic. We have heard about this in these meetings, the energy, what is the best type of energy that can work for their countries, what kind of jobs. And within this has been very optimistic. The meeting we had, it was very good because the youth were able to express how things are going and their proposals. And I thought it was very funny that these type of problems that we have to have with the youth is there was one young man from Brazil who precisely, he will go from Brazil to the New York conference, the May conference. And there was a moment where our interpreters were interpreting, doing interpretation from English to Spanish. But there was a moment where he started speaking in Portuguese. And it was very funny because we were all quiet. There was no way to interpret his words from Portuguese into Spanish or into English. So that changed the geometry of the meeting, thinking, how can we do to hear the proposals of youth, young men, young people from Iberoamerica in their language? And how can we transmit these ideas to other young people in the world? That's the type of topics we want to address in this youth dialogue, how we can answer to what is what they are presenting and what we are doing. We are having these meetings all the time, especially with Helga. This time we have the participation of Megan Dobrot and Jason Ross, who gave the ideas, and it was very productive. And there was a lot of optimism that through this work with the youth, as Martin Luther King said, we are doing it because it's necessary. And the people who are criticizing that this is because he was creating this tension is because they don't understand. And I want to finish in the same letter that Martin Luther King wrote. Like Socrates, he says he believed it was necessary to create a state of tension in the mind in order for people they overcome their dependency, and and that is the way so how we can be individuals, and that's what is happening with the youth. And so we are inviting them to participate, to register, to participate in the May conference, which will be very important. And we will have a youth panel, and we will be presenting these proposals and the work we are doing with them. That's what I wanted to present. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for that wonderful report. It sounds like this meeting was incredibly lively, and there's a lot of exciting things coming out of this process. So thank you very much, and everybody else who's participating in that, which we want to welcome everyone who's either on the Zoom meeting or on any other platform. If you want to bring in your children, or if you know any younger people and you want to invite them to the conference, we'll have a special panel just for them and a breakout session with some of the panelists, which would be an excellent opportunity for them to meet some of these world historical figures as young people, if you want to invite them to this conference. So you can go to the Schiller Institute website. You'll find the conference link to RSVP there in person, or I'll put it in the Zoom chat here as well. But yes, thank you again, Carolina, for that. I'm looking for Jack. Unfortunately, I think we may have lost him on here unless somebody else sees him. Yeah, I know he was traveling at the moment, so maybe we'll get him on during the discussion period. So hopefully he's okay and he's not pulled over somewhere. So please be safe, Jack. Okay, so that brings us to the point of discussion. We'll be going to the discussion period. I wanted to see if Dennis or Harry, or if anybody has a response so far to anything said before we jump in and make the transition.
Not for me.
Okay.
I just want to
So-
thank Carolina for her emphasis on King. I think that's important. Not just important in some general sense, but when we talk about Easter and the idea of resurrection, one of the best things you could possibly do in the United States is to resurrect the living Martin Luther King, who's usually ignored, not just in terms of the holiday, but obviously in terms of all of American foreign policy. I mean, all of the time, by everybody. One of the more disturbing cases of that was the Barack Obama Nobel Prize, which he got for nothing, but then he decided that it was his job to critique King and then go to war. It's not funny, but the reason that we laugh, as Ray said, is that you have to have a sense of humor about the things that we are confronted with, and also because, frankly, higher forces, I'll suggest God, has a sense of humor about things like this. We have a role, and those of us, it's interesting to think about the fact that you have Father Berry on, you have Ray, you have others. We, of course, have an earlier history with members of the civil rights movement, such as Amelia Boynton Robinson and the Reverend James Bevel, who was the architect of the Birmingham Children's March. And most of the video that people see of the water hoses, of the dogs, and so on, much of that video comes from one march in Birmingham in May of 1963, where Bevel insisted that it was his duty to go and get children to get involved. And when King discussed this with him after he got out of jail, King was in jail in Birmingham. That was the occasion for the writing of the letter from a Birmingham jail. King had gotten some criticism directed toward Bevel. And what Bevel said is, well, he always called King Doc. He said, well, Doc, let me ask you a question. We are Christians, correct? And of course, King said, yes. He said, and we teach people that they're supposed to follow Jesus Christ, right? Yes. And we do this from what we call the age of reason. And that's 7 years old, right? Yes. All right, now we believe it's reasonable to teach people who are 7 years old and slightly older to follow the path of Jesus Christ. Yes, he knows where Bevel's getting at. So he says, so, Doc, if we're telling people that they got to follow to the point of crucifixion by the age of 7, surely they can get out in the street to support their parents' right to go down and eat a bad hot dog at a Woolworths. So that sort of, you know, gave King what he needed to allow for Bevel's work to be continued. And I think it's the same kind of spirit that we should take and realize that on this call, even on this Zoom call, in these meetings, we have various of the veterans of that process and may be able to do a bit more than we're thinking up to now concerning actions that we should perhaps begin to consider. I just wanted to say that, and of course, the conference we're having is a perfect place for people to come together to discuss that. And again, we invite everybody to come. So just wanted to say that.
Great, thank you. Okay, and with that, we'll do our transition to the discussion period. If you are on another platform outside of Zoom, whether that's Twitter or yes, X now, YouTube, Rumble, whatever you're on, Facebook, if you want to participate with the panelists today, please go to schillerinstitute.com and you'll find the RSVP page as one of the first items on the website. Register and you will get the Zoom link to join, and you are welcome to participate in this discussion. And with that, Dave, just let me know